This episode of the Endpoints of View podcast is brought to you by SentryBay, home of the armored client, the world's most advanced endpoint protection.
It's genuinely startling, isn't it? How commonplace news of another significant data breach has become. You almost expect it these days.
It feels relentless sometimes.
And that feeling of our digital lives being constantly at risk, that's precisely what we're digging into today.
Yeah, we're focusing on three pretty major recent incidents.
That's right. We've got our sights set on the Dutch ministries, Royal Mail, and the Yale New Haven health system.
Because they paint a clear picture of how these attacks are actually happening right now.
And crucially, what we can learn from them, what you can learn.
Exactly. We've been poring over the reports detailing these breaches, different sectors entirely.
Government, logistics, healthcare.
Right. And what's striking is, well, not just the scale of each incident, but the underlying similarities. The how.
How they got in. So our goal today, it's laser focused. We want to dissect these three cases, pinpoint the methods, the actual techniques that allowed these breaches to succeed.
And maybe most importantly, understand how organizations can, proactively defend themselves. Get ahead of it.
We want you to come away with a solid understanding of the current threats and, crucially, what effective defenses actually look like.
And it's fascinating, isn't it? Like you said, different organizations.
Totally different.
But this consistent pattern of attack seems to be emerging. It's less about, brute force at the network perimeter.
Smashing the gates down.
Yeah, exactly. It's much more about exploiting vulnerabilities at the individual user level, the endpoint.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Starting with the breach that hit close to home for many, the Dutch ministries.
Right.
Reports of a data breach affecting multiple government entities. This isn't just like leaked emails, is it? We're talking potential risks to national security here.
For sure. The ministries of economic affairs and climate, green growth have been named, and there are indications BNR reported others might be involved too.
So the Dutch Interior Ministry is investigating, the Dutch Data Protection Authority, the GDPR folks, they've been notified. Standard procedure, but still serious.
Very serious. And what makes this particularly concerning is the context. We remember that big breach in 2024.
The police officers' data.
Yeah. Contact details of 65,000 Dutch national police officers compromised. And that was attributed to a state-sponsored actor.
So this latest incident, unfortunately, kind of fits into a trend, a pattern of, escalating attacks targeting government agencies.
It seems that way, which leads us naturally to the crucial question of how. How are they doing this?
And the reports suggest infostealer malware is likely the culprit in these kinds of attacks. And sounds pretty sophisticated. What is that, basically?
Well, think of infostealer malware as a kind of silent operative. It gets onto a device, and its only job is to steal confidential information.
Okay.
And the preferred methods, the ones we're seeing again and again, are key logging.
Recording keystrokes.
Exactly. Recording every single keystroke a user makes. And screen capture. So taking silent snapshots of what's on the screen.
Wow. So rather than trying to, batter down the digital front door, they're slipping in through a side window and just quietly observing everything, writing it all down.
Precisely. They're after those digital keys, right? Login credentials for internal systems, those really important access tokens. Screenshots maybe showing sensitive emails or documents or chats, and of course, any personal data they can get their hands on.
But what makes these tactics so effective? Why do they work so well?
It's their ability to blend in.
Yeah.
This type of malware, it often masquerades as, legitimate software. It might use techniques like DLL injection to hide itself from standard antivirus programs, even some endpoint detection tools.
So flies under the radar.
Totally. They can remain undetected for ages, giving attackers plenty of time to hoover up all the information they need.
That sounds incredibly stealthy.
Right.
And persistent. So what's the countermeasure then? How do you defend against something that's, designed to be invaluable?
Yeah, that's the key question. And the reports rightly emphasize the need for a proactive cybersecurity posture. You can't just react anymore.
So waiting for the alarm isn't good enough?
Not really. Implementing a zero trust model, which basically means don't automatically trust anyone or any device, always verify, that's becoming essential.
Yeah.
And at the device level, the endpoint level, advanced endpoint protection isn't just like a nice to have anymore. It's fundamental. It's a requirement.
Right. Okay, let's switch gears. Different type of target now. Royal Mail.
The logistics giant.
The recent data breach involved a massive leak, right? 144 gigabytes of internal data.
Huge amount.
And this one really throws a spotlight on supply chain vulnerabilities, doesn't it? Third-party vendors.
Absolutely. The Royal Mail incident is it's a stark reminder of how interconnected everything is and the risks that come with relying on third-party vendors.
And in this case, the finger seems to point at Spectos, a company they worked with.
That's what the reports suggest, yeah. Spectos, they do data analytics and operations stuff for Royal Mail. It looks like they were the initial point of compromise.
And the sheer scale, but also the variety of the data that got out,
yeah,
it's pretty alarming.
Oh, yeah.
Customer names, addresses, shipping details, all that PII, personal information, that's gold dust for criminals.
Definitely. But it wasn't just that. It also included internal communications, even recordings of Zoom meetings, apparently.
Wow.
SQL databases, data from MailChimp, and incredibly even footage of meetings between Royal Mail and Spectos themselves.
Grief. It makes you wonder what wasn't exposed.
Exactly. And what's particularly noteworthy here is the reported involvement of this hacker known as GHNA.
GHNA?
Yeah. Apparently, this individual or group has been linked to previous breaches affecting other big companies. It suggests, a more professionalized cybercrime scene where access and stolen data are monetized.
Sold off.
Yeah.
So not ransomware in this case. They weren't locking files.
Doesn't seem like it. The primary goal here looks like pure data theft, exfiltration, and likely sale.
Okay. And Royal Mail, they've acknowledged the incident, said it affected Spectos.
Yes, they put out a statement saying it allegedly affected their supplier, Spectos, and investigations are ongoing. But it really, really underscores that point.
Your security's only as strong as your weakest link.
Precisely. And that link can often be a third-party provider. Integrating external vendors it expands your attack surface, doesn't it?
Massively.
Each vendor with access is another potential door for attackers. It just highlights how critical robust vendor risk management is. Due diligence, strong cyber clauses in contracts, continuous monitoring.
All that stuff.
All that stuff. And again, how did they likely get into Spectos in the first place? The reports suggest, again, keylogging and screen capture malware. To steal credentials, watch how they accessed Royal Mail's systems.
It's that same pattern again.
Mm-hmm. It's a sobering thought, especially when you think about Royal Mail being, critical national infrastructure. The impact goes way beyond just money or reputation.
Definitely. Which brings us neatly, if unfortunately, to our third example, Yale New Haven Health System.
Yeah, the healthcare sector. And this one is huge. Reportedly the largest healthcare data breach so far in 2025. Affecting over 5.5 million individuals.
5.5 million, that's just staggering. A huge number of people whose sensitive information is now potentially out there.
It really is.
And what's particularly interesting in this case, as the reports highlight, is this apparent shift in attack methods. Again, less about forcing entry through network holes, more about just grabbing legitimate user credentials directly from devices, from the endpoint.
That's a key trend we're seeing everywhere. Why bother with complex network exploits if you can just log in?
Right. Find the key instead of breaking the lock.
Exactly. Steal the credentials. In the Yale New Haven case, they detected unusual activity on March 8th, 2025. And on that same day, unauthorized access and data exfiltration occurred. That screams efficiency. Targeted.
Yeah. Quick turnaround. And the types of data compromised. Well, it's exactly what you'd fear most in a healthcare breach.
All the sensitive stuff, full names, dates of birth, addresses, phone numbers, emails, race, ethnicity.
Social security numbers, too.
Social security numbers, patient type, medical record numbers. Now, they report that actual medical treatment data and financial account info weren't affected.
Which is something, I guess.
It's something, but the rest. Still incredibly sensitive. Perfect for identity theft, fraud, all sorts of malicious uses.
No doubt. This kind of data is highly prized on the dark web, isn't it?
Extremely valuable. And the reports clearly indicate the healthcare sector is just becoming more and more attractive for these endpoint-focused attacks. We saw CharterCare back in 2023.
The ransomware attack in Rhode Island.
Yeah, hit over 600,000 people. Unfortunately, these incidents, they just seem to be on the rise in healthcare.
And across all these reports, these three very different cases, the same attack methods keep popping up. Stolen credentials obtained via
keylogging and screen capture.
It really does seem like these have become the go-to tools, the tools of choice for pulling off modern data breaches.
It's quite clear. A significant number of these breaches, Yale New Haven included, they start at the endpoint, the user's device. Attackers are using keyloggers to grab usernames, passwords, even things like patient IDs in a healthcare context. They're taking unauthorized screenshots of sensitive medical portals, extracting authentication tokens.
And often doing it completely undetected by traditional security.
That's the danger. They operate below the radar of many standard tools.
So let's synthesize this.
Yeah.
We've looked at a government entity, a logistics giant, a major healthcare provider, completely different fields.
Right.
But we see this clear, consistent pattern emerging. Keylogging and screen capture are, well, significant and preferred attack vectors?
Seems that way. They're allowing attackers to bypass traditional security and just pilfer sensitive data on a massive scale.
And it's because these methods let them operate so stealthily, right? Harvesting credentials, confidential info directly from the user's machine.
Exactly. They don't always need complex network vulnerabilities anymore. They target what's often the weakest link, the endpoint itself, the person using it and the device they're on.
Which brings us finally to the critical question. What's the answer? How can you effectively prevent these kinds of attacks? The reports we've looked at, they repeatedly highlight something called endpoint threat prevention.
Yes.
And they specifically mention SentryBay's armored client.
That's correct. Endpoint threat prevention, it really represents a fundamental shift, a move towards a more proactive security strategy.
So not just detection after the fact.
Right. Instead of only focusing on detecting threats after they're already inside, it concentrates on neutralizing the very tactics attackers use, like keylogging, like unauthorized screen capture, stopping them before they work.
Okay, so how does a solution like Armored Client specifically do that? How does it counter keylogging and screen capture effectively?
Well, it uses several critical security features built in. For anti-keylogging, it's not just detecting the recording.
It's opposite.
It actively prevents credential theft. It substitutes randomized input right down at the operating system level. So basically, it scrambles what the keylogger captures, makes it useless.
Oh, okay. And screen capture?
For anti-screen capture, it stops unauthorized applications from taking screenshots of sensitive information displayed on the screen. Full stop.
Right.
It also offers selective screen sharing. So, legitimate applications like Teams or Zoom can still share your screen if you want them to.
But malware can't just spy.
Exactly. It blocks those potential surveillance tools. And crucially, it provides this protection in real time at the OS level, which means it can even defend against zero-day threats.
Threats nobody's seen before.
Threats that haven't been identified or added to a blacklist yet.
And the reports mentioned it's compatible across different environments, like IGIL OS, Microsoft AVD, Windows 365.
Yes, it's designed to be pretty versatile, protect endpoints regardless of the OS or, how they're deployed, virtual desktops, physical machines.
And there was a quote, wasn't there, from SentryBay's CEO?
Yeah, Tim Royston-Webb. He basically emphasized that, look, these data breaches are increasingly fueled by successful keylogging and screen capture. It's happening. And he highlighted that Armored Client was specifically engineered to tackle those attack vectors right at the endpoint, to prevent the data compromise before it even occurs.
Right. So pulling everything together then, looking back at these three major breaches, Dutch Ministries, Royal Mail, Yale New Haven, what's the core message, the big takeaway for everyone listening?
I think the fundamental takeaway is the undeniable and frankly growing importance of really robust endpoint security in today's world. The threat landscape has evolved. These incidents clearly demonstrate how attackers are successfully using these stealthy techniques, keylogging, screen capture, to steal sensitive data. It works.
And the information we've looked at strongly suggests that proactive solutions, these endpoint threat prevention tools, like SentryBay's Armored Client, they offer a proven way to stop these specific types of breaches.
They do, by directly neutralizing those increasingly popular attack methods. Traditional security, firewalls, basic antivirus, while still important, they're often just not enough against these sophisticated endpoint attacks anymore.
So you need that proactive layer.
Precisely. A proactive approach focusing on preventing credential theft, preventing unauthorized screen capture right at the source, the endpoint, it's now essential for safeguarding sensitive information really across all sectors.
It really does underscore the importance, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Thinking beyond just the network perimeter, the main gate, you have to focus on the security of every individual digital endpoint, every window and door. Whether you're part of a huge organization or just managing your own personal data online, understanding these prevalent attack methods, keylogging, screen capture, and knowing there are solutions designed specifically to combat them, it's more critical than ever.
Absolutely.
It's a clear sign, I think, that just locking the front door isn't enough anymore. We really need to ensure the locks on every single window are just as strong. Something for you to think about in your own context.
This episode of the Endpoints of View podcast has been brought to you by SentryBay, home of the Armored Client, the world's most advanced endpoint protection. For more information, visit sentrybay.com.